Okay, hello everyone. I'm Apocalypse the Geek Guru. Uh, Sorry I took a brief hiatus last week, but I'm back again to talk about the Gilded Age. We had a good episode this week, or rather last week. So we can get right into it. Episode 7, Irresistible Change. Now it starts out with them, Mr. Russell showing a model of his station that he's going to build, and apparently it's going to be lit with all electrical lighting. So they have this big demonstration. You can see right here. It's got, that's what apparently it's going to look like. All be lit with, electric. And I I love this whole scene, and them being like, okay, this is the wave of the future, and like, stuff like that. Because I love science and like innovation and stuff like that. Like, I'm just like a nerd and stuff. So after they have a little ceremony, everybody's standing around talking, and Larry, Larry, just seems like such an it just seems such an out of place name for, like, I don't know. Anyway, so Larry decides that now is the time to tell his dad, like, hey, I want to be an architect. Every time I say that, every time I hear that, I just think of George Costanza from Seinfeld. I always wanted to be an architect. So anyway, he tells his dad, and his dad, Mr. Russell, he actually sort of reacts a little. I mean, I expected him to act either, be supportive or be like, "What? What is this?" So, but I thought he would be more supportive of him. But he actually took it a bit hard. He was like, "What? What do you mean?" Because Russell tells him. I mean, they're all Russell. Larry, Larry tells him, hey, he's like, I want to be in, and he's got Gladys is right there with him, and Mr. White, the architect who built their house, who he's like been talking to and stuff, been telling him that he wants to be an architect. So Mr. Russell comes up, and he's just like, George Russell comes up, and Larry is just like, hey, Dad, he did a great job. I find it very inspiring. Architecture, I mean. And he goes, that's why I'd like to be an architect. And his dad is literally just like, I don't understand you. I don't understand you. What? Like, he's immediately just like, what? What do you mean? You already have a job. Where did this come? Like, which is understandable. You know, he had this expectation for his son. He had this whole thing lined out for him, and now his son's just like, no, I don't want to do that. So he kind of pulled the rug out from under him, which, we'll get into later. He makes a good case as to why he wants to do this and everything. But I just thought it was funny how Mr. Russell was just like, what? What do you mean? What are you talking about? You already have a job. And I was actually a little surprised at his reaction. I thought, that's something that I would expect his mom, Mrs. Russell, to say. I would have thought I would have thought he'd have been more supportive, but I guess I was wrong. It's not the first time, guys. It's going to be the last. And I don't think we actually get to see Mrs. Russell's reaction. I don't think she knows yet. I don't believe so. But Mr. White tries to help him out and be like, I think what he means is that he thinks it could help out with your business. He'd study architecture for a little while and then come out and help out. And his dad is just like, is that what you want? And he's straight up, nope. No, that is not. I want to be an architect. And, good on him for holding his guns. I like Larry. We don't see a whole lot of him, but I think we see enough. A little Larry can go a long way. I've heard that before. Somewhere. So anyway, Mr. Russell's not having any of it. He shoots him down. He's like, no. He's literally like, no. Now I'm going to take your mom and your sister to the carriage. Take care of our guests. Shoots him down. So that's the end of that scene. So we cut to the Van Ryns. And immediately we get to see some payoff from last episode. Agnes's first line is like, "But what do I say to Oscar when he gets here?" You know, because remember last episode, Miss Armstrong had told her that Oscar and Mrs. Turner were a thing, Miss Turner, whatever, were a thing. Now they're not. They're actually just having like a secret spy thing. He's spying on the Russells for him. So, but Agnes is quick to jump to conclusions. So she believes her maid. Yeah. So she's just like, what do I say? Like, what, he's disgraced his family and all this. And Ada, lovely Ada, she's just like, well, and he's like, well, what? What are you gonna say? And she's just like, and Ada just says that, all men or most men have a fling or some sort of thing when they're young, and they live to tell the tale. Like, it's not that, she's just basically saying it's not that big of a deal. Agnes, obviously, is like, it's not something that I want told. It's not a tale I want told. I don't, and, Agnes is like, and how would you know? Have you been living some sort of double life? And Ada's just like, no, but I'm not so simple that I don't know what goes on. I love them. And Agnes is just like, oh, you'll be calling yourself a woman of the world next. I love how not even Ada believed him. Not even Ada believed him. Like, does he have no credibility? Seriously. Your lady's maid tells you that your son's having an affair, and you believe her over him. Like, I mean, I guess, yeah, in this world, especially in that time, especially, the lady's maid, they did have very much trust for their lady's maid. I mean, they had to, but still. But anyway, so Ada is basically just like, I'm not Rip Van Winkle, who, and I understand that young men have their wild oats to sow. And for those of you who don't know who Rip Van Winkle is, that's so hard to say. You might have heard the name or heard, it's an old story, it's an old folktale or whatever about, I don't think it's folktale, it's an old story about a guy who falls asleep for like 100 years and the world is all different and stuff and changed. So anyway, that's what Rip Van Winkle is. It's basically a story about like a hermit who, didn't go out and see the world. Perhaps a cautionary tale about getting out there and experiencing things, because if you don't, well, it'll be like in Shawshank Redemption when the dude got institutionalized. People can become sort of institutionalized even in their own homes when they sort of like sequester themselves and, seclude themselves from everything. So, you got to get out there. So anyway, and Agnes is just like, even if that were true, they do not have to sow them with servants. In the other room, in the dining room, John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt is there. Okay. So I have since learned, since my last video, I'm not sure if I talked about this or not, but I think I put it in the description. John and Jack were essentially the same name back in those days. And actually up until the 1960s, I think. I might have mentioned this in my last video, but I can't remember, so I'm going to cover it here. But yeah, they were basically the same thing. Like John F. Kennedy was also known as Jack. So, I don't know when exactly that split, and it became, Jack and John were two definitive names. But yeah, back in those days, if you were John, you were also Jack. So, but that doesn't irritate me any less. Like, that still pisses me off that they can't, like, pick one, damn it. Like, seriously. It's irritating. So, but John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt, he's back there and he hears them, talking about someone with servants. And Ada is just like, what would you prefer? An actress or a prostitute? And I love how she says actress and prostitute as if they're on the same, as if they're on the same social level. Like they would, Like, what the I love this show. I love those two, man. Like, what, an actress or a prostitute? Like, oh my god. So, she's like, Ada! She's like, I'm gonna have to ring for smelling salts if you don't moderate your tone. And I remember, I believe I already went over what smelling salts were or something. I might be wrong about that. I'll have to look that up some point. But, you know. So basically, she's just Ada, and Ada's just defending Oscar. But she's not defending him, saying, well, what if he didn't do it? She's like, no, he did it, but it's okay. Oh, man. So basically, Agnes is just like, so what do I do? When Ada's just like, do nothing, say nothing. So then we have Bannister walk in. And remember last episode, heads have rolled for less. Bannister is in big trouble for for giving the dinner, like running the dinner at the Russells' house. He walks in and he says, Miss Bauer, the cook, she wants to know if we can have a precise time for the dinner. And Agnes is just staring out the window. Doesn't even look at him when he comes. Doesn't even acknowledge him. Ada has to go. Ada like looks at him, looks at her. She goes, Agnes? And Agnes turns around and she's like, Ada dear, would you tell Mrs. Bauer? Would you tell Mrs. Bauer I think it would be nice to sit down to dinner at 8:30 tonight? And then she just turns back and continues to look out the window. And Ada just kind of looks up at Bannister like, thank you, Bannister. So she's still not talking to him, and once he leaves, that's the end of that. And then we go to, it cuts to the Russells. So basically they're talking about they're going to have this big party where they're going to illuminate the office of the New York Times. And I'm pretty sure this is an actual event, I'm pretty sure. Okay, so yeah, that was an actual thing, and they even say September 4th. At September 4th, 1882, the New York Times building was like one of the first, I think it was the first building completely lit with electricity, which they'll show. We'll get to see that later. But, so, Mrs. Russell and Mr. Russell are talking about that, and Mr. Russell's saying that, you know, Thomas Edison invited him to attend, you know, in the meeting for, in the lighting thing. So, they're talking about that, you know, they're basically just saying that they're going to go and be at the lighting. So, and then he's like, Clay called him and he said that they're going to go meet with the lawyers today because of the train accident and basically the guy that accused him of okaying them to put the old used rails on the car. So they're going to go meet with the lawyers and talk about that. And then it cuts to Bannister, and he's holding up his $100 check. And he got $100. And it was a good amount of money back then. Well, it's a lot more than I got. About $100 more than I got. So Mrs. Bauer is just asking him like, hey, what are you gonna plan to do with it? And he's like, well, I might open up a bank account. And then he goes, and I'm going to find out who wrote that letter to Mrs. Van Ryn if it's the last thing I do. Which I love. He's not going to let that go. And then we see Larry. He's just walking down the street. Marion just happens up upon him. She's walking little Pumpkin, the dog. Love that little dog. And basically, she asks him like, "Hey, what's going on? What's wrong?" And he's just like, "I had a falling out with my dad." And she asks if it's about architecture. He's just like, how do you know? Just because you told me that day outside Mr. White's office. Like, yeah, I guess he's out of it. You can't even remember conversations. How's he going to remember floor plans and building plans and shit like that? She's telling him, like, hey, your dad loves you, you know, he's gonna get over it. It's like, yeah. And Larry's like, yeah, with my dad, with love, there's a price to be paid. And it basically says that, you know, I cannot deviate from his ambitions, which is what I was talking about earlier. Like, his dad has, it's funny, his dad has, like, a set thing for Larry, and Mrs. Russell has a set thing for, like, Gladys. And when she like, he has a problem with he has a problem with her being too hard on Gladys, but here he is not letting Larry, like, go and do what he wants. It's like, so anyway, he says that, you know, Mother, me, Gladys, we all must walk the steps that he's laid down. And, you know, she's just telling him, you know, do what you've got to do, like, do what you want to do, otherwise you're going to regret it, basically, is what she said. Basically what she says. And so she's like, all right, I got to get Pumpkin back. Goodbye. Good day. Goodbye. So then it cuts down to the downstairs of the Russells, and Mrs. Bruce is talking, you know, telling everybody that they're going to have a thing for the, whatchamacallit, the lighting ceremony. So Mrs. Turner's just like, oh, what's the big deal? We've known about electricity for 100 years, and and she's always just so bitter and hateful. So, and then Church is like, but Mr. Edison has tamed it. He knows how to use it, and all this and that. And it was interesting. They're talking about electricity. These lights that they have and everything in here, those aren't electric lights. Those are most likely gas lights, or maybe even candles. They're probably gas lights, and those tubes are literally most likely actual tubes for the gas, or it could just be candles. I don't know, but it looks like that's what it could be. So they don't use electricity. They don't have electricity. They've just got gas, which is what tons of people used till old man Edison and his incandescent light bulb helped humanity beat back the dark. So basically, they're just asking, like, you know, what's it going to be? And Miss Bruce is telling them that it's just going to be a picnic, basically. They're just going to go down there in carriages, you know, nothing too big. And Miss Turner is just like, oh, I think she's going to try and get Mr. McAllister there again. And persuade him to be seen with her in public. And, you know, she, again, always hateful. And Mrs. Bruce is just like, I'm sure he'd be very glad to be seen with her in public. And Miss Turner's just like, oh, even you don't believe that, Mrs. Bruce. You know, talking about Mr. McAllister. But he may tolerate a good dinner and a decent seat for the display. And then Church is just like, please give us a rest from your nastiness, Miss Turner. And she's just like, what's that, Church? And walks off. She's such a... Oh yeah, I'm editing now, so can I bleep stuff? Let's find out. So anyway, then it cuts to Mrs. Astor's daughter. I don't know her first name yet. And Gladys. They're walking around the ballroom, and, you know, basically talking about the what the hell is it called? Quadrillion? Anything like a cotillion, whatever. Some sort of the party that they're planning on having. And she's just like, well, we might as well cancel the thing because I'm never going to be able to set a date. You know, and then Miss Russell walks in. She's like, what are you talking about? We can set a date. And I love how Gladys is literally, like, shocked. Like, what do you mean? what's changed, mother? Like, like she's completely shocked that her mom is letting her be like come out and like have a party, and she's just like, why are you so surprised? Like, did you think I would let you be the only debutante without a coming out who wasn't like have a coming out party? So they're talking about that. Gladys seems almost a bit sad at the end. I don't know why. So anyway, it cuts to Mr. Russell. He's talking with the lawyers. And he's asking them if they've seen the letter that Mr. Dixon, Mr. Dixon is apparently the guy who okayed the use of I don't know why I can't say this. He's the one who okayed the putting on of the used rails or whatever. Like, he was the guy in charge of that. And so, and he says that he has, remember he said that he got a letter from Mr. Russell to do that. So, Mr. Russell is basically asking his lawyers, like, if they've seen the letter. And his lawyers are like, yes, and it apparently appears to be genuine. But they'll have a handwriting expert, look at it. And Mr. Russell asks him, like, what does the letter say exactly? And they pull up a copy, and he's like, apparently the letter said, the price is ridiculous, find a cheaper option. I don't care what it takes or how you do it. And followed by his signature. And even Mr. Russell is like, well, that does sound like me. He says, it certainly sounds like me. And, which it does, honestly. Like, it really does sound like something that he would say. Although he wouldn't have meant doing things illegally and stuff like that. Doing anything that would harm people. He would have probably meant within the like proper means. At least I think. It's what I've gathered from him from watching this show. So anyway, Mr. Clay asks him, like, can we confront Mr. Dixon? Is there anything we can do to stop him? And then he's like, I don't know, we'll have to go to trial with this. And Mr. Russell brings up that he's like, but didn't we pay the full price? Like, we paid for the new rails. But so why do we have, where's the money? And they're just like, well, Dixon doesn't have it. It's missing. We can't trace it back to him. And so that's a good point that Mr. Russell brings up. It's like, but hold on, we paid for the new ones. Where's all the money? So that's probably gonna be the big thing, is who has that money. That's that's gonna be the one that most likely did it. It's possible that Dixon didn't do it, but had somebody else even a little bit higher up could have told him to do it. But so he told me. So they're just telling him, like, expect the worst. And then it immediately cuts to the Van Ryns, and we just see Oscar storm out. He just storms out, and as Marion's walking down, like, what's going on? And then she walks, he storms out of the house, and she walks into a little parlor and asks, like, hey, what's going on? So Agnes is like, he's angry with me, even though he has no right to be. And, Marion asks, well, what's happened? And she's like, well, Oscar's disgraced himself. And Ada goes, Miss Russell's maid. And Marion goes, how democratic. Saying, like, insinuating that he did it to, like, bridge the gap. I think that's what she's saying. If that's what she's saying, that's hilarious. But she's joking, obviously. And Agnes is just like, really? You think this is funny? She even mentions, on top of Bannister's betrayal, it is too much. She just can't let that go. And then again, Ada is like, he tried to deny it. I just can't get over the fact that she doesn't believe him either. Oh, man. And so she's like, Agnes is just like, are you telling the story or am I? Although why we're telling it to Marion, I don't know. So anyway, she goes on to say, he said that they were friendly acquaintances and that was all. And Marion tries to, she's like, well, I mean, I suppose. And then Agnes is just like, as if my son would number a lady's maid among his friends. Which is a very good point. Like, why would he be friends with her lady's maid? I mean, they're not, because here's the thing, they're not actually, like, friends, really. They're just, cohorts, partners in crime, so to speak. They're not friends. They're just allies. You gotta watch out. There's a big difference between a friend and an ally. So anyway, she's again, she makes a good point. Like there'd be no reason for her. So she's just like, even Ada thought it was nonsense, and she barely knows how babies are born. She's just like, Agnes, your anger is making you indelicate. And so Marion asks, well, what do you want? Well, what are you gonna do now? And Ada goes, I want her sacked. She's just like, I want her out of there. I want her out on her ear by tomorrow night. They're all just like, well, are you going to write to her? What are you going to do? And she's just like, no. My mother said, never write anything down that you wouldn't want printed in paper. She's like, I'm not going to write to her. I'm not going to go over there. You are. She's talking to Marion. Marion's just like, what? I don't have the right to ask her. Like, how am I supposed to ask this woman to fire her maid? This isn't my problem. She's like, this is definitely your problem. Your family's honor is your family's honor is on the line. She like puts her hand on Ada's shoulder, and Ada's like, oh God. So I'm sorry. So she tells Agnes tells Marion, she's like, I may be didactic, but I do not often give orders. And I had to look up what the hell didactic means. Apparently it means instructive, So basically she's saying like, I may often instruct you, but I never give I don't often give orders. And she goes, but this is a direct order. Will you defy me? Is that what we've come to? She's so serious. And then it cuts down to the Van Ryans and she's John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt. That's still what I'm going to call him, because I refuse to call him either John or Jack if neither of those, or if both of those are his name. I'm taking a stand. So anyway, he's like, were y'all in the hall when, I was like, I was in the hall. Like, did you hear what was going on? I was in the hall when Mistress started shouting at Mr. Oscar. Now, I'm a little disappointed that we didn't get to see the accusation and then Oscar's, retaliation. Like, I'm upset that we didn't get to see that. We literally only got to see him storm out. I feel like I have no idea why they would have cut, like, did they not even film it? Did they cut it? Did they not think that people would want to see that? Because I definitely want to see that. Like, that's something that I wanted to see. I would have loved to see him react. Or I don't know. Maybe they just didn't have the chops to do it. I don't know. But yeah. So anyway, he's just like, I heard the noise, and then he slammed out and ran out. Because he was like, him and Marion were both like coming out when Oscar slammed the door and ran out. And Mrs. Bauer's just like, which made one less for dinner. Excuse me. And we got the rest of the ice cream to share. And then Miss Armstrong is like, these things happen. And Peggy's just like, you don't sound too surprised. And this is the first time I think I've ever seen Miss Armstrong, like, genuinely happy. Like, she is... I gotta tell you, she is genuinely smiling. Like, hold on. Not there. It's going up right here. But she is so happy because she made this happen, and she is just so bitter and like look at her. Just freaking smile. Like, oh my God. She's too happy. She is way too happy. So she's just like, all right. She's just like, oh, these things happen, I'll get over it easily. And then she's like, oh, I've got something to do. I left some things in the wash. And she walks out. And the second she's gone, Peggy's like, she knows more than she's saying. And Miss Bauer's like, all ladies' maids know more than they're saying. And they all chuckle. Which it says in the screen caption, which always makes me laugh. So anyway, then it cuts to the Russells. And Mr. Russell's eating his dinner late because he had to stay and talk to the whatchamacallits and Clay as well. So he's basically saying, there'll be a hearing, and, then that will determine whether or not it goes to trial. And she's basically just like, well, what do you mean? What, haven't they found the man to blame? And he's like, it depends. Some people think I'm to blame. And she's just basically like, this is the thing that's irritated me the past, and has irritated him as well for the past 2 episodes. She's just like, we can't have a scandal, I'm just getting into this thing, and we've come so far. And she's just like, but I've already settled a date with Mr. McAllister. And he's just like, well, God forbid I should be a disappointment for Mr. McAllister. And she goes, if you think this is funny, and he's like, starts raising his voice. He almost looked like he was going to hit the table. I almost wish he did. Because it's like, this shit's serious. Like, she does not understand, like, at all. She really doesn't. So he's just like, I don't think it's funny. I don't think it in the least funny that I'm facing the possibility of prison and my wife is more concerned with the date of a ball. Which is totally understandable. And she storms out like she's got any reason to. But without a word, because there's no response to that. Because he's 100% right. Like, she's totally in the wrong. He's facing prison time. And she's like, we can't have a scandal. I'm getting into high society. Oh my. You've got to be kidding me. Be good to test my new editing thing to see if I can censor myself. So anyway, we go to Peggy, and Peggy is meeting with Mr. Fortune, and they're talking about. Hold on, let me go. I can see this name because I didn't actually know this. She's saying how they're talking about the lighting ceremony, how mentions that it's a great thing that what Mr. Edison's done, and Mr. Fortune says that Mr. Edison's not solely responsible, and she asks like who else is involved, which a lot of people know that nowadays, that it was that Edison had like a bunch of people who work that would work for him. He didn't solely like create like everything, but he's credited for doing it, which. Whatever, it sucks, but shit, Anyway, so she asked who else is involved, and he said a lot of people, namely Lewis Latimer, who was apparently a black inventor, who I don't think I've ever heard of Lewis Latimer before. And he says that he is the one who invented a new, like a better carbon filament, which is the stuff that keeps the light bulb going, For those of you who don't know, the filament is that little thing in the light bulb that gets red hot because of the electricity going to it. Anyway, for more, watch Dr. Stone. It's a great anime. Anyway, so he's saying that, he tells her, we're going to be at the ceremony. We're going to be at the ceremony, because, we're going to go to the ceremony together and look at, and report on it for the news. I almost said the Times. They're not the New York Times. They're going to the New York Times, though. So anyway, he's telling her he wants her to interview people in the crowd and get their impressions as well as her own. And then they'll meet there on the night and travel to Park Road together, blah, blah, blah. So, she's just like, oh, thank you. Which, she should, because that's a historic event. It's a huge historic event that, like, I don't know how many people went to it, but, anyone who was there, like, that's a huge thing. I think it was might have been the first building completely lit with electricity and light bulbs. It's a momentous occasion, which I think they mentioned several times during the ceremony. So anyway, he tells her that he'll bring her along to remind Mr. Edison a black man will make his technology better, you know, which did. Apparently a black guy did make better, which is something I never knew. So I love watching shows like this. I love watching period pieces and like historical stuff that actually takes historical events into like actually uses historical events, because I like to learn stuff about history and shit like that. So anyway, then it cuts to Marion at the Russell's house, which I always love seeing Marion at the Russell's house because it's such like this grand palace, and we often see her at the Van Rhynes, which is sort of like it's sort of smaller, you know, like the Russell's house. Everybody says when they see the Russell's house, like, whoa, this is a palace, you know. So it's just kind of, especially since Marion's sort of like, I don't want to say homely. She's just sort of like sort of small town girl. That's what I'm looking for. You know, she's more of like a small town girl, so it's weird to see her like at freaking Buckingham Palace or Versailles, you know. So is it, you know, like, look, oh, don't do this to me. Like, look at her little outfit. It just doesn't. It seems so off for this big place. Anyway, those two are. Hold on. Yeah, those two are sitting there talking, and Marion's just like, I don't know how to say this, but I'm just a messenger. And Miss Russell's like, well, now you're frightening me. And she's just like, I'm just a messenger from my aunt. And she goes, she wants you to fire your maid. And Miss Russell's just like, what? She goes, I think she's called Turner. She's like, am I to know why? So she's like, Marion basically tells her that she's seeing an aunt that she's seeing a man that her aunt doesn't approve of or whatever. And Miss Russell's like, what man? Marion's just like, his name's not very important. But Miss Van Rhyne feels that it's an improper liaison. Yeah. So Miss Russell's just like, well, what proof is there? And she goes, Marion says, they were together in the street and she laid her hand on his arm. And Miss Russell's just like, is every woman who touches a man's sleeve in the middle of an improper affair? And Marion's just like, well, my aunt believes that is generally the case when the couple are in very different rank. Which is how to talk about, you know, because anyway, she goes that Miss Russell's just like, well, I need to speak to her, but I can't prove, you know, I'm not gonna get like I'm not gonna like just fire her without any proof, you know. Suppose it was her brother or even a cousin. And Marion's just like, well, we know the man and he is not her brother. But my aunt told you. She said that I told my aunt that I would need evidence to convince you. Well, let's move on. And she says that she wants to ask her advice or her permission, perhaps her permission. And Marion's like, what? Really? And she says that, Miss Russell says that she's planning to ask her, she's planning to ask Mr. Rakes to come, you know, be with them for the, like, tree thing. I think of like tree lighting, you know? Anyway, she says that, you know, Aurora says that she sees him everywhere these days. And for those who don't remember, Aurora is the other, the charity lady, Miss Fane, who I always call Miss Fine. So anyway, she's like, that's if you don't object. And Marion's like, well, why would I object? And she goes, because I'm afraid there won't be room for you. Sips her tea. She's like, oh. And, you know, she tells her, like, we're going we're going to have a picnic and some carriages. And Marion's just like, oh, what fun! What fun you'll have. I wish I was there. I'm jealous. And then look at the face she makes. That's the face she's making. Like, oh, you're gonna go to a party with the guy that I love, and you're not gonna invite me, and you're gonna invite some other women. Oh, it's like I'm jealous. I'd love to be there. And anyway, Mr. Russell's just like, the trouble is we've only got 8 seats, and I've got Larry, Gladys, Mr. McAllister, the Fanes, and a friend of Aurora's. Anyway, which is so screwed up because she's like, she decided to invite a friend of Aurora's instead of, and Mr. Rakes instead of Marion and Mr. Rakes, even though she knows that they have, like, a thing. Funny. She mentions that it's maddening of an Aurora to land me with the other woman. Otherwise, it could have been you. More coffee? Like, this is so petty. I'm wondering if she's trying to sort of drive a wedge between her and Mr. Rakes, because I wonder if she might still like if she still holds a grudge because of the dinner party in the first episode. Like, yeah, Marion came, but she only stayed there for a little while, and she didn't tell her aunts and this and that. You know, so she still might hold a little bit of a grudge, or it could just be because she doesn't like her aunts. But either way, I think she's trying to drive a wedge between her and Mr. Rakes. So anyway, then it cuts to downstairs at the Russells. Yeah. And Church is basically telling one of the footmen that all he's got to do, he's just basically explaining him what to do at the thing, because I guess Church wouldn't be there because I think the butler has to stay at the house, and when they go off, like I said, the butler stays at the house to run the house, because like I mentioned before, the butler kind of runs the house. And he'll leave the footman to handle picnics and stuff like that. So Church isn't going to be going. Anyway. Okay. And it's funny because the guy is just the footman. He's like, I don't like horses. And he's like, you're a postilion, not a jockey. I don't know what the hell a postilion is. I haven't heard that term. But anyway, he's just like, you're not gonna go anywhere near a horse. Just get the food. It's all set out. I love the chef. The chef just looks, he's like, everything you need for the dinner will be packed in a hamper and strapped to the luggage. It's all gonna be fine. I just look his face. He's just I don't know. He just looks cool. So anyway, Miss Turner is so she got Mr. McAllister to go after all. The luncheon she gave him has worked wonders. Or do you not care to be reminded of that, Church? Mr. Church. Talking about how, what's his name? Bannister basically gave the luncheon, and Church got cast aside. And Church gives everything right back to her. I love him. He's like, I do not care for insolence, Miss Turner, from you or anyone else. She's like, she goes, Mr. Bannister made such a success of it. And he goes, get back in your cave. Oh man, I love Church. I love their catty rapport. It's just so great. Just get back in your cave. Oh man. Okay, so anyway, he's just the cook's just I pay no attention to her, and he's like, I intend not to. But anyway, as they all get up and start leaving, and Mr. Watson, who we haven't seen a whole lot of, we saw him stare at some woman. We've seen him leave. He leaves a lot apparently, but we haven't really seen anything of him. He's one of the only characters that we haven't really, that have been hinted at, they've hinted that, oh, there's more to this character, but we haven't seen any. He's the only one. I don't know. Maybe it's going to be some huge, big thing. It better be. But anyway, so Mr. Watson is just like, why do you always have to go after church? And she has the audacity, the sheer hubris to say he's too big for his britches. What? You tried to sleep with your boss because you thought you were like something special. No, if anyone in that house is too big for their britches, it's you, bitch. Man. So anyway, so then it cuts to Mr. Rakes is literally, he's literally waiting outside for Marion. She's like, what are you doing here? He's like, waiting for you. She's like, but suppose I hadn't come back. She's like, I'd have stayed for an hour or so, and then I would have walked home. Wouldn't be the first time. So I wonder how many times he's just like staked out her house, waiting for her. Kind of weird. Some might call it courtship. I call it pretty close to stalking. Anyway, she's like, oh, and why did they particularly? And he's just like, I needed to see your face. I need to see your face at regular intervals to keep me on the straight and narrow. So, because I'm sure he mentions that he goes to a lot of parties and stuff. I'm sure women talk to him, talk him up. To be honest, I'm not sure what he sees in Marion. It could be that Agnes is right, and that he's just after her for like her position or whatever. But I mean, here's the thing: it's not that Marion's an unattractive woman. I mean, I still think that she looks like Peeta from the Hunger Games, but she's not ugly by any means. But there's just nothing like spectacular about her. Not just with her looks. I would just mean like how quickly he fell in love. It just doesn't, like, why? There doesn't seem to be any particular reason for it. It just seems rather rushed. I don't know. But anyway. So he's just like, he said, saying, I need to talk to you. I need to see you. And she goes, well, Miss Chamberlain's offered to entertain us both at her house. And she's like, we could talk there. And he's like, well, now I'm encouraged. It's like, why? Because if you're prepared to meet with Miss Chamberlain, it means you're not afraid to take risks. So, I mean, here's the thing. I hope his intentions are sincere. I just don't, it just seems odd how quickly it happened. So anyway, then it cuts to, she leaves she's like, okay, I'll send a message to Miss Chamberlain and let her know. And then it cuts to, then they go their separate ways. And then it cuts to the Russells. And she's like, she just sort of peeks her head into the library, and she's just like, hey, I'm going to go get changed with Turner. She's like, Turner's going to go help me get changed or whatever. So she's like, by the way, Miss Brooke called this afternoon to ask me to dismiss her. And he's just like, what? You're to dismiss Turner? She's like, wasn't that strange? She's like, Miss Ryan thinks she's been having an affair. And Mr. Russell's just like, how does she know? And Miss Russell immediately is like, I think it must be her son. I'm not completely sure, but that's what I suspect. I love how Marion tried so hard to like be like, oh, we can't tell you who it is. We can't tell you. And she didn't fool her for a second. She's just like, I think it's her son. Like, he's just like, Oscar Van Ryan? And he goes, I had a letter from him today. And he's, Oscar sent him the letter saying that he supports them and stuff like that. And he's just like, so are you going to fire Turner? And she's just like, I don't know. Do you think I should? He's just like, it's not for me to say. Just going to go back to my papers and not mention that she tried to have sex with me. And he's looking at, like, he starts looking after the, he's looking through his letters and stuff, all through his papers and stuff to figure out if there's any, can, like, figure out his case and stuff like that. And she mentions, she says something that really shows the difference between the two of them. And she says that, how could they think that you would write a letter to a cog like Dixon? And he immediately goes, I do write notes to people in every department. Like, they can prove that. And that just really shows, like, she's like, why would they even think that you would write a letter to some peon? And he's just like, I do. I'm a nice person and care about my company. Like, and that just goes to show how little she really knows about, like, shit besides trying to get into high society. So anyway, she says that, she intends to go to Mr. Edison's thing. She's not going to cancel or anything like that. And, she's basically just like, we'll face this together. She's willing to face it together. She just doesn't understand I just feel like she really just doesn't understand how big of a deal it is. So anyway, then it cuts to Oscar Van Ryn coming home. And Marion's just like, hey, are you all right? There was a little problem between you and your mother. And he's just like, a little. She won't be persuaded of the truth, so I've agreed to the lie. And, which is really funny. Because the situation that he's in, he is actually having an incredible, like, a huge affair that would be a total scandal back then. And he was sort of cohorts with the lady's maid. He's now being accused of having an affair with the lady's maid. And the whole reason he was having that cohort with the affair, with the agreement with the lady's maid, was so that he could get into the Russell's house and be like, so that he could secure his affair. Man, I said it before. When the show first started, I cannot wait to see how he navigates and how he does everything, and like what his life is gonna be like. And here it is. I'm loving it because he's just like the waters he's got to tread. Oh, jeez. So anyway, he asked Marion, like, was it you? Like, are you the one that told her? And she's like, no, I didn't know. And even if I had, I wouldn't have told her. And he's just like, well, what will be, will be. I love it. I just love his attitude. And she's just like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry for all the upset that your mother's had to go through. And he's just like, yeah, my mother wants everything for me except a life. And then it cuts to what might be one of my favorite scenes in the episode. Mrs. Russell, I'm gonna have to show you this. Mrs. Russell is walking in her palace in downstairs, and up in the upstairs in the little corner, she hears, and it's her talking to she's talking to Larry, and Miss Russell's just like, what the hell? And not only that, but she touches his arm. She touches his arm. And Mrs. Russell is just right there to watch it. That is just a perfect shot right there. Oh, man. Now, I don't know if that's just something that she does to people, like just touches their arm. It has to be. Yeah, it has to be. Because she did it to Oscar, and she wasn't flirting with Oscar. So yeah, I was thinking about like whether it was something that she was deliberately like that, she just does when she laughs, because a lot of people will do that. They'll sort of touch your arm when they laugh, and another Seinfeld flashback. Anyway, so I was thinking like, is she trying to flirt with Larry, which is also possible. I'm not ruling that out as an impossibility. I'm just saying like that is just something that she kind of does, like when she laughs, like she just kind of touches people on their arm. So, because again, she did it with Oscar, and she has no reason to flirt with him, unless she was also flirting with Oscar. That is another possibility. She's just a whore. Anyway. So that we can all pretty much see where this is gonna go, and I love how they don't wait around, they don't beat around the bush. It's literally the very next scene, the next scene we get to see the payoff from that. So she's just like, it's literally Mrs. Russell's first line. Turner mentions like, oh, you haven't worn this necklace in a while, or dress or whatever, and Mrs. Russell immediately goes, Turner, I've been thinking. Which everyone knows are like the four worst worst words to hear. Yeah, like, Apocalypse, I've been thinking. Here we go. She goes, and I was wondering if it's time for us to take a rest from each other. Perfect pause. And what? The sack you wanted, is it? That was a good one. That was right off the top. Anyway, she's just like, we don't get on as we used to. Yeah. And Turner's just like all employers, you set the tone. And she's just like, see what I mean? Oh man. And she's like, did Mr. Russell ask you to do this? And she's just like, no. No, but he did ask me to give you a good reference. And despite some misgivings, I will. So that's good. Mr. Russell's just such a nice guy. It's just like, give her a good reference if you're going to fire her. And she starts to say she was gonna say like something, but she didn't say anything. I don't know what she was gonna say. If she was gonna say like he tried to, if she was gonna say like he tried to have sex with me or something, like I think she might have tried to say, but I think she might have been gonna. I think she was about to try and say he tried to have sex with me, or he tried to come on to me, or something like that. But in that moment, like, she realized she's not gonna believe me. Like, she's against, like, this is for something else. She's against me. Like, I think she realized that's not gonna work. And then she walks out, and see her again. So. Oh my god, I just noticed this. So, they receive, the Van Ryns receive a letter. Bannister comes in to deliver it. Now, quirky music. Now, it's worth noting that the letter is to Mrs. Van Ryn. It's not to Ada. He is delivering the platter to Agnes. But Agnes is still not having anything to do with Bannister, so Ada has to take it and hand it to her. And then she's got to. Oh man. But she can't let it go without anything. She tells Ada. She tells Ada, ask him when it was delivered. And Ada goes, when was it delivered, Bannister? And then she's like, just now, Mom. And then Ada goes back, just now. I just love how petty Agnes is being. It's so petty and childish. I love it. And then Agnes goes, before he goes, tell him to ask John for some tips on serving luncheon. Everything went so smoothly when John was at the helm. And Bannister's like, what? Because John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt. I said John just there because that was a quote. But so anyway, because John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt was literally like bringing in some tea while Bannister was right there. He was like, what? and Ada. There's a lot of great faces in this one. Just like, thank you, that will be all, Bannister. Thank you, Bannister, that will be all. Like, even she's just like tired of Agnes. Oh, man. And as soon as he leaves, Ada is just like, when are you going to forgive him? And she goes, when he has earned my forgiveness. Love them. So, she's sitting there reading the later. When Marion walks in and she's just like, apparently she just came from Bloomingdale's. And Agnes is like, oh, Mrs. Russell has fired her maid. And Ada literally gasps. She's like, gasp. She's like, oh. And Marion's like, wow, I'm amazed. She didn't give any hint of it when I was with her. And Ada's just like, oh, you must have been more eloquent than you realized. And Marion's like, will you write to her? She's like, of course I won't write to her. She might write back. And Ada's just like, you must acknowledge her letter. She's done what you asked. Which, And then just as at that moment, Peggy walks in. It's like, is there anything I can do for you before I get changed? And Agnes is like, please thank Miss Russell for this note, but without a trace of warmth. And have John take it over. Because she still won't. Although that is actually sort of more of something for a footman to do, delivering letters and stuff. It would actually be a little odd to have a butler deliver a thing. Like, remember, it was actually a little odd for Bannister to go and get Pumpkin. And that was a dog. That was like an actual dog, like an actual living like creature that Ada loved. And Church still found it odd that they sent the butler and not a footman. So, but I just love how she said to send him specifically. Like, he's the only footman they have. If it's not going to be Bannister, and if it's not going to be John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt, who's it going to be? The maid? They didn't deliver letters back then, really. They weren't correspond. Well, again, depending on how many people were in the household. If you had a footman, you wouldn't send a maid. But if you didn't have anything except for a maid, like Peggy's parents, remember, they just had the maid, and she was the one who would bring in, I'm just remembering her face. It's so funny. But she was the one who would bring in their stuff, but still on a silver platter. So anyway, we cut to Miss Turner not learning when to stop. She walks into Mr. Russell's room. Now, granted, she is like fully clothed, literally like with like a bunch of buttons and like an overcoat and everything. I guess just to really drive home that she's not there for that, But Mr. Russell's just like, what are you doing here? He's like got a little bed desk working on his letters and stuff. He's like, what are you doing? Like, what the? Didn't you learn from last time? Anyway, she asks him, like, did you have me sacked? And he's like, no. and I got you a good reference. She's like, should I be grateful? It's like, yeah, you should be. But he goes, that's up to you. But it's like, no, you should be grateful. He could have gotten you sacked. Easily. And she asks him about the train crash inquiry. He's like, what do you care? And she's like, I care very much that you emerged from this unscathed. Basically telling him that, she basically goes over what she said before about how, like, you missed something in me. I would have been a woman devoted to you. I would have given everything, all that I have, to you and your happiness and your health. And she goes, could Mrs. Russell say the same? And, like, while she was saying all that, he was just kind of, like, looking around, like, still kind of glancing, like, like, whatever, yeah. But when she asked, like, could Mrs. Russell say the same? That's when she gets his attention. And she's like, That's when he, like, actually looks at her like, damn. Because for the past few episodes, they've been having some rocky spots. He's starting to really, like, look at her for who she is, and I don't think he's really liking what he sees. I wouldn't either. Granted, I don't care for anyone who would try to steal someone else's person away from them with, seducing them. Like, if you really, I feel like as though if she really cared and really, like, cared about his happiness, she wouldn't just try and seduce him. She would, like, explain to him using logic and reason, hey, she's a terrible person. Here's why. You don't deserve her. She's, like, you're better than her. So maybe she is sincere and she really does love him, just didn't know any other way to go about it, or maybe she's just a whore. I don't know. So anyway, she's just like, I would have cared just for you, only for you. And she's just like, well, I'll say goodnight. And she starts to leave. And I honestly thought he was going to be like, for a little part of me thought he was going to be like, wait, come here. A little part of me, but nope. He's a better man. So, as she's walking out the door, she's like, perhaps we'll meet again. And he doesn't, he's just like, I doubt it. Like, just looks over, I doubt it. But maybe they might. He does sort of stop and, like, because, he sort of, like, stops and, like, thinks after she leaves. I know for a fact he was thinking about it. Like, I know for a fact he was really thinking about it. The first time, he thought about it a little bit. He was like, no, I love my wife. But the second time, that time, after he's really seen a bit more of his wife and how she, they've had these arguments about, they aren't even arguments. They're just her being a bad person. Yeah, a bad person. Like, for not caring more about the scandal than your husband going to jail. Yeah, I'd consider that a bad person. Or at least someone who's, what's the word I'm looking for? Values are skewed or something. Someone who values the wrong things. But yeah. So I think he's starting to see that, and he just had this woman who's already shown that she desires him physically, at the very least. This woman who's like, I would have given everything to you. I've talked about this before. Men can be very vulnerable, and when a woman that you care for isn't sort of like, when it turns out the person that you love isn't who you think they are, that can cause doubts, or at least there's more to them and sides to them that you didn't understand fully. It can be difficult, and he's in a very vulnerable position right now. Like he talked about, he was talking about, or not he, Mr. Russell, Oscar, and her were talking about how people who are in vulnerable positions like people to support them and stuff like that. They really appreciate that. And now here he is in a vulnerable position, and his wife is basically just like, oh, you need to fix this because, I'm trying to get into high society. And here's this other woman who's just like, I would give you everything. You would be my main focus. So it's a tough thing to, like, it's not something you just scoff at and just, like, it's something that you would think about. Okay, so then it cuts to Mrs. Chamberlain's house, and her and Marion were already there talking, and immediately Mr. Rakes walks in. and they say hi to each other, and I believe it is the first time they're actually meeting, and Mr. Rakes goes, the famous Mrs. Chamberlain, which good on him for not saying the infamous Mrs. Chamberlain, because she's far more infamous than famous, to be honest, like, if we're being honest. And he mentions that her pictures are quite as fine as he's been told. Now, honestly, I'm not sure if I mentioned this. I think I covered it a little bit last time we were at Miss Chamberlain's house. I don't really care for a lot of her paintings. Some of them are just, I don't know. It's they all seem to follow a lot of the same art style. It's not the art style that I necessarily have a problem with. It's just some of them are just, I don't know. I don't really care for them. Like the balance, like, okay, one right here. That one's not bad. I kind of like that one. But there's another one like next to it that I really just don't care for. Something I just noticed. I feel as though HBO Max, someone at HBO Max is watching my videos, because HBO Max updated its stuff. Like, I swear to God. One, the rewind and fast forward that I've been bitching about forever, it's slowed down. It's not as fast as it used to be. Two, this thing that was one, that's changed. And two, look, it went away. So now it's not in the way, darkening the screen. Not for as long anyway. But that painting, yeah, I don't care. I don't care for that. But yeah, the two things that I'd complained about on HBO Max, like with their thing and everything, they fixed. Like, coincidence? I think not. So anyway, Marion and Tom, his name is Tom. Tom Thomas. My grandfather's name is Thomas. And so here's the thing that bugs me about them, is that they've basically been having the same conversation for the past like 5 episodes. Oh, I love you, marry me. Oh, my aunts, I can't. Oh, come on, let's do it. Oh, okay, sure. Oh, but I can't. Like I feel as though the last 3 or 4 episodes at least, they have made no real ground. I mean, yeah, this is kind of a step forward a little bit, them being alone in a room together, but at the same time, they're still just talking about the same shit they've been talking about. It was just so, I was really kind of excited for their little love interest, but they're just dragging it out so long. Like, come on, let's see some ants. Like, some ants. Let's see him talk to the ants, Let's see him get in a luncheon. Let's try to make some headway. Add some drama for fuck's sake. She asked him if he was going to the lighting ceremony on September 4th. And he was like, yeah, I am. And she was like, oh yeah, with the Russells group? Yeah. And they were basically talking about how she mentions how she couldn't go because they didn't have enough room. And he was like, you should have told me. I would have canceled and you could have taken my place. And she mentions that would have messed up the numbers. And here's the thing, I believe that a lot of times back in those days, when you wanted to set up a party, you wanted to have an even number, or not an even number, but yeah, kind of even. You wanted to have roughly the same amount of men as you did women, I think. I could be wrong about that. Why? Various reasons. trying to set people up, simply so people have someone to talk to. I don't know, simply so they can split off into groups, and then, I don't know. But I believe that was often something that they did. So it's funny, when they were sitting there, I was worried. I was like, worried. I wasn't worried, but I was sitting there like, is someone gonna walk in on them? Like, and then I was like, wait, no, they're at Miss Chamberlain's house. She invited them there. No one can walk in on them. That'd have been funny though. Two episodes in a row, and Agnes stormed in on some place. And Agnes just stormed in. What are you doing here? That'd have been funny. But then it cuts to the not so dynamic duo of Miss Turner and Oscar Van Ryn. And they go immediately into it. They go through my head. She just can't keep her eyes off it. She just... I'm sorry, I just saw that. I couldn't pass that up. Which is what she's thinking. Anyway, so he's like, so she gave you no warning? They're talking about how she just got fired. And she's just like, no, nothing. I was helping her change for dinner when she said it. And she mentions that she had her hands on her neck and she wanted to tighten her grip and squeeze the life out of her. And Oscar Van Ryn is like, man, I wish you'd had it. Made things simpler for the both of us. For us both. And so basically they're just talking about how she's going to leave real quick. About how she's about to leave. And she mentions that she might get church while she's at it. Like, get back at Mr. Church. Because he wanted her out just as much as Miss Russell. And Oscar says something very optimistic. He goes, I'll miss your instruction when I get back into the house. Assuming that he's going to get back into the house. This is what I meant when I said I love his attitude. And she mentions that things will be a lot easier because Mrs. Russell is bringing bringing Gladys out. And basically they're talking about how he wants to get with Gladys. And I'm starting to agree with a lot of what people have said about, a lot of what those commenting have said about how I don't think Oscar's intentions are totally honest. Like, I like the dude. I see a lot of myself in him. Hey now. But, so perhaps I'm just projecting a little bit when I say that I hope that he's, actually likes Gladys, but I think he might actually just be looking for a beard. And not this kind. I've talked about this several times about what a beard is. Quickly gloss over. It's a woman or a man that a gay person or a lesbian marries, a gay man or a lesbian marries to keep up appearances and to make them seem not homosexual. So that's what that is. And I think that maybe that is what he's looking for with Gladys. Not only that, but monetary security. Because I'm not sure how much the Van Ryns have exactly, but I do know that it's probably a lot less than the Russells. Because I think I've talked about this before. They don't have, as far as I know, the Van Ryns don't have any source of income. Yeah, they might have some stocks, but that's a bumpy thing to, work with. That can go up and down to anything, anything can happen with that. they most likely had a vast amount of wealth accumulated and have just been living off of that, as a lot of families did back then. Not only that, but they also apparently give to charity sometimes, I believe. So he could be just looking for some family that has an actual source of income. Now, and then it cuts to the Van Ryns, and John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt is bringing down a letter for Bannister, the butler, and it's from Miss Turner. And I love this episode because they have a lot of quick payoffs. You know, we're not waiting for the next episode for things to happen. It's like, boom, okay, we're setting this up. Next scene, boom, it happens. I like that. This episode had a lot of quick things happen. Had a lot, you know, really liked it. They kind of packed a lot into it. So anyway, he's saying that it's from Mrs. Turner. He's talking to John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt, and he's saying that no, it's from Mrs. Turner, the lady's maid. And he's just like, has she written to say goodbye? He's like, in a way, and to tell me who wrote the letter, which came while you were serving luncheon, and I was across the road at Mrs. Russell's house. And and he, John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt apologized about it. He's like, oh, I'm sorry about that, because he is the one who gave her the letter. And Bannister mentions like, well, you weren't to know. Like, yeah, he's not gonna know what's in the letter. That's why we have envelopes. So anyway, he asked him, what are you gonna do about it? Like, I'm not sure. I'll have to think about that. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. He doesn't actually do this, but he might as well have. Honestly. Like, he's kind of busy holding the letter, but if he hadn't been holding the letter, I'm sure he would have, and he had a big armchair to lean back in, I'm sure he would have sat down and been like, I'm not sure. But they say revenge is a dish best served cold. Like, he's got something planned. So apparently, I'm assuming that she told him that it was church, which how she would know, I don't know. I don't think that she knew, per se. I think she simply suspected and was right. I mean, it wouldn't be that hard to figure out, honestly. Gee, who would want to scorn a butler who was upstaging another butler? I wonder. Oh yeah, the butler did it. Duh. So that was Bannister. Now, I'm wondering what he's gonna do. Like, what can he do? Like, that man. Now that I say that, it's like, what can another butler do to screw over another butler? And it's like, there's kind of a lot that he could do. He could so easily like mess up some sort of order or do something like this, some underhanded thing. I know that's I know that's not specific in any way, but like, there's ways he could screw it up, even though I can't quite think of any. Now, then it cuts back to Miss Chamberlain's house with Mr. Rakes. Now, Mr. Rakes says something that I disagree with. He says that statue is marvelous, and I wholeheartedly disagree. I think it's, I don't want to say grotesque, but I think it's not that good. I just don't care for it. Anyway, I'm also an art guru. So, oh yeah, that's right. But I do like that painting back there of the woman. I don't know why. She seems very beautiful. That's the thing about women in paintings, or even men in paintings, or other people in paintings. It creates this sort of, I don't know how to explain it. This impossible attraction, because it's like, they aren't there, and yet there they are. It's very abstract in nature. Like I said, art guru. Anyway, so basically he's just talking about the art, and hey, this is the art. Honestly, it's really a boring scene. Like, it's not long, but Miss Chamberlain tells them, she asks them, like, hey, would you like my advice? And they're like, yeah. And she mentions that if you turning your back on society when you're young might not seem like that big of a deal, but when you get older, you're gonna realize that it can be a lonely place out there. And she's obviously speaking from experience. So she's saying that, if you're going to do something like that, make sure that it is for true love so that you don't regret it. Essentially. And she walks away, and Mr. Rakes is just like, ever the diplomat. But our love will be enough. I know it. And it's like the more he talks, the more I feel like I don't trust him. I don't know why. I don't know what it is. But and then Marion's like, you sound as if you're trying to convince yourself. And he goes, yeah, I am convinced. And she's just like, the fact remains, I don't want to quarrel. She doesn't want to she doesn't want to have a altercation with her aunts. But she mentions that Aunt Ada would most likely support them, and she actually does. We'll see that in a minute. But it's Aunt Agnes. She's the real problem. So he's like, he kind of pulls her over to the side and is like, I love you. That's what I need you to know. And then they have like a little, he asks her to marry him again. And they have a little make out in the alcove. Which, it's like, again, they just keep, like, beating around the bush, honestly. They don't, like, let's see something happen. Let's see their aunts find out. Some drama. Take a step forward, for sakes. Oh, man. And so anyway, he's like, all right, I'll go and find Miss Chamberlain and say goodbye. And he goes, she's a clever and interesting woman. Although I better not let Miss Astor find out, because he is trying to get his way into high society, but it is just for her. And then we get to see Aunt Agnes at her dressmaker. Strikingly beautiful woman, honestly. And she's telling her dressmaker, like, make it a little fuller in the back. The bustles. How women back then would wear those huge, like, back ends. Other way to put it. And she's basically telling her dressmaker, like, make it a little fuller, make the bustle bigger. And her dressmaker's like, if you wish, madam, but I should warn you that bustles are getting smaller. Her dressmaker telling, like, for most people, her dressmaker is like, trying to advise her, like, hey, big bustles are kind of going out of fashion. For most people. And Aunt Agnes just goes, I'm not most people. And I love, like, Aunt Agnes is refusing to change even her fashion, which even Ada wears, like, smaller bustles. She doesn't wear this huge big dress, like big dresses. And so Ada is actually there too, because it's like, if Agnes is gonna leave the house, I bet she has to bring Ada with her. Like, I just feel like that's something that's gotta happen. Like, that she does. Like, I'm running an errand, you're coming with me. So anyway, Ada, out of the blue, asks if Marion and Mr. Rakes did. I love how she calls him Mr. Rakes and not Tom. I mean, I know that's like the formal thing and that's what they did back then, but it's still funny. She goes, if Marion and Mr. Rakes did come to an arrangement, and Agnes stops her right there. She goes, what have you heard? And Ada's just like, nothing. I just mean if they did marry. You wouldn't really cut them, would you? And obviously she doesn't mean like slice them. She just means like cut them off. And it's just funny the way she worded it. Like, you wouldn't really cut them, would you? To which Agnes responds, don't you want me to? And then Ada's like, no, not at all. And then Agnes goes, I'd like them to think I would. Which really shows a lot about Agnes. It tells a lot about Agnes, because it's like she is willing to allow change, sort of. Like a little bit, increments, small amounts. And she does love and respect her family. And she would rather her image be someone of who is like, like Mrs. Astor, who is completely opposed to everything, someone who is definitively old money. But yeah, I think she is starting to realize that she can't, after that dinner, when she barged into the dinner and saw everybody there, like some of her friends and people that she knew at the dinner, she realized like she can't hold off change forever. And then Ada, so Ada's like, it wouldn't make a difference to Marion. Like, she doesn't care whether Miss Astor receives her. And then Agnes goes that she might not care, but he does. Insinuating that Mr. Rakes actually does like, being in high society and going to balls and stuff. But Ada asks, like, is it possible you might have misjudged him? And Agnes says, it's possible an earthquake might destroy New York, but it is not likely. I love when she says grandiose things like that. So anyway, then it cuts to Mr. Russell. And he's sitting there looking through papers. That's all I really have to say about that. He's just looking through papers. I don't know what legal documents, I'm assuming. Former correspondence, stuff like that. And then Larry comes in. He's like, hey, I knew you were still here, and I want to see you. And alone. And Mr. Russell's just like, goodness, this sounds serious. And Larry, good on him, says, I want to talk some more about my having a career in architecture. And again, Mr. Russell he acts unexpectedly, to me at least. He goes, not this again, and gets up from his desk and you've asked me once and I've said no. And he's being a lot more stern than he usually is, at least with his children. Like with Gladys, he's very, which again, I pointed out earlier, like I love the fact that they're both they're both worried about, like, he's worried about his son, she's worried about her daughter. Like, I wish that we could have seen her reaction to him wanting to be an architect in this episode. But we didn't. Oh well. So he asked, does it matter that Mr. White, one of our, Stanford White, potentially one of our greatest architects, that I might have talent? And Mr. Russell's just like, the great Stanford White turned your head when he built our house. Basically saying that their house is so great that it drew him to architecture. Which is possible. We've seen the house. Everyone who sees the house is like, holy crap. And then he sees this new station that they're planning to build. It's going to be all lit by electricity. And he's like, man, people that build stuff are awesome, you know? So Larry's just like, well, what would you prefer me to do? And he's like, what you're doing now, of course. Like, you study my business and take it over in time. And it literally says scoffs in the caption, in the closed caption. I love that. But so Larry just like scoffs, and Mr. Russell's like, what is it? And Larry goes, Father, you're a genius. You know, you made a fortune that will go down in legend. I doubt there are a dozen men in the country who are successful. I doubt there are 100 in the world. And you know, he's basically saying like, you're a great man. He's like, what chance do I have of following in your footsteps? Like, I'm always going to be the disappointing second act. Like, I'm always going to be the poor second son. You know this. You know, he's all, I mix those up, but whatever. And you know, he's saying that with architecture, I have a chance to make it on my own, which is great. Like, and Mr. Russell's just like, and my companies, and you know, Larry's like, you find men, train them, take them over, train them to take over the business and protect what me and Gladys's, you know, money, our legacy and stuff. And then Mr. Russell does what I expected him to do, and he goes, you know, you're very persuasive. And he puts his hand on his arm and is like, promise I'll think about it. Which, pretty sure we all know means he's gonna, which it's a yes. Anyway, then he goes back to like, all right, now I have some pressing matters of my own to deal with. Which, you know, Larry's like, yeah, the train business, of course, yes. And they wish each other luck while soft music plays. And then we go to the bar that Oscar and Mr. Adams feel so comfortable talking in. And Mr. Adams is just like, so she's gone. You've lost your spy in the Russell's house. And Oscar's like, yep, but things will be easier in the future. Gladys's mother will bring her out, and after that, she'll be plenty of parties all over town. And I just have to say again, how it's like they're in the middle of a bar. They're not worried about anybody listening in. Anyway, he goes on to say that it won't help with Gladys if she hears of it, but it may play well when people learn Turner was sent away because she and I were lovers. And Mr. Adams is like, a smokescreen to hide your true nature? So, here's the thing. It might be that I was wrong about him being bisexual. He might actually just be gay. And him wanting to kiss Marion might have just been a smokescreen for his mother and Marion and his family. Because he's an intelligent dude. Like, he's smart. He knows how to, he thinks quick. And Oscar's just like, don't talk like that. I hate to be defined. Which also might mean that he is bisexual. Because Mr. Adams, saying to hide your true nature, insinuating that, to hide the fact that you're really gay. And he says, don't talk like that. I hate to be defined. It could be that he doesn't want to be defined as someone who's gay or straight because he's neither. And they didn't really have, I don't think they really had I think back then you were either one or the other, So I don't know. And so basically he's saying that it might be okay if Gladys and everybody finds out about him and Miss Turner, even though it's all a lie, because, it might be good for him hiding the fact that he's whatever. Whatever the hell he is. And Mr. Adams asked him, did you plan on this? And he's like, no. But And this is what I mean by he's an intelligent person. He's like, no, but I'm a great believer in turning every chance encounter to my own advantage. He says as he crashes a walnut for some reason. And when he does that, the dude behind them turns back and like looks at him. And again, it's like, dude, you're in the middle of a bar. Literally the middle of a bar. You don't think anybody's listening? Nobody? Whatever. So then it cuts to the Van Ryns. And Marion is basically telling Agnes about... basically, she's just trying to talk up Mr. Rakes and be like, hey, he's a good guy. You know, you should give him a chance. And, you know, Aurora loves him. And as I mentioned earlier, the Aurora is the other Miss Fane, the charity lady. And Agnes is just like, Aurora has recently accumulated a certain social promiscuity recently. Basically saying how she's, I guess Aurora has probably gone down a bit because she's possibly because of her association with Mrs. Russell and maybe even Miss Barton. But Ada is like, but you're fond of Aurora. And classic Agnes, she goes, I'm fond of you. It doesn't mean you're without fault. Oh, man. And then Marion is like, and Agnes, you're not being fair. And then Agnes goes, if you mean I'm not being wooed by his looks and his so-called charm, you're right. Which, that's all she thinks Mr. Rakes is. It's just good looks and some charm. He's just trying to get his place in society or whatever. And maybe she's right. But I don't know. He seems very sincere and like such a nice guy. I don't know. Anyway, then it cuts to Peggy. She's getting ready to go out to her, to the thing, the lighting, the tree lighting, you know, the Christmas tree lighting. Anyway. And again, it's funny because, again, Marion is like, not able to go. She's like, oh, I'm so jealous. Like, face, don't say face, but still, she's like, ugh, God. And even it's funny because Peggy was like, I was of two minds about telling you whether or not I was going. Basically saying that like she didn't know whether or not she should tell her or what. Seeing as how she couldn't, Marion couldn't go. And Peggy's just like, I think it's a shame you're not going with Mr. Rakes to Mrs. Russell's party. And Marion's like, there's no room in the carriage. And Peggy's like, she should get a bigger carriage. Which is funny, because Mrs. Russell could have easily gotten bigger carriages, I'm sure. She just chose not to perhaps spite Marion for whatever reason, which is kind of messed up. And again shows, if that is true and that's actually what she's doing, then it shows really the kind of person that she is. Because Marion hasn't done anything nice to her. I mean, anything mean to her. She's gone out of her way to be nice to her, actually. So it's so stupid. If that's what's going on. Now, then it cuts to Mrs. Russell. She's getting ready to leave. Then it cuts quickly back to Aunt Agnes, the aunts. And Ada is just like, wow, this is the most important innovation of our lifetime. And Agnes is like, is that something to celebrate? And Marion's just like, I think so. I wish I was there. Like, to see Park Row illuminated? And Agnes is just like, but with what sort of people? Ruffians, thieves, and worse. And then Marion mentions that Miss Russell is taking a party. And Agnes is just like, I rest my case. And then she mentions that, Marion mentions that Miss Scott's going too to cover it for her newspaper. And Agnes is just like, and I will read about it like civilized people do. So basically, Ada and Marion are just they're I almost feel like they're very subtly trying to convince Aunt Agnes to let them go, to like have them go and see it, but she's not having it. And Marion's just like, oh, well, I won't go without your permission. And Agnes sees right through, and she's like, you're very obedient all of a sudden. What are you planning to spring on me? Now go. Ring for that reprobate banister. She still can't. She can't let it go. I'm wondering when she will. Or if she's going to fire him. Bring on, have John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt be the main butler. And then Bannister does something with his $100 or whatever. That'd be funny. But I don't know. So then it cuts to the lighting. I almost said tree lighting ceremony. I honestly did. It cuts to the lighting ceremony, and Mr. Rakes is there with Miss Bingham. That's the woman that Aurora brought. And Mr. Rakes is just like, more champagne? And she goes, I shouldn't, but I will. And then Mr. McAllister, good old Nathan Lane, he's there. I love, he's like, that ought to be my motto. I love him, everything he says. And he's sitting right next to Mrs. Russell, which is great. And so they're basically just sitting there talking about, because apparently Mr. McAllister is married. I didn't know that. So he is married, and Mr. Fane even mentions, like, hey, your wife must be very forgiving or accommodating or whatever. My wife watches me like a hawk, you know, talking about how Mr. McAllister is always going out to these parties on his own and stuff, without his wife. And Mr. McAllister's like, she's happy as a clam, tucked up in Newport, listening to the sounds of the sea. And then they start talking, because Mrs. Russell's like, she mentioned that she's never been to Newport. And then everybody, you know, they all start talking about, oh, Newport's great. You know, it's such a great place. All these rich people and everything. Mr. McAllister looks at Mrs. Russell and is like, of course you must come to Newport. He goes, I insist. The town is just waiting for you to tear down its defenses and conquer it. And she goes, must everything be a challenge in life? Everything worth having. And then Gladys says, but surely the point of going to the sea is to feel the wind in your hair and listen to the waves. Such a lovely soul, Gladys. And then she goes, and that's all free. And Mr. McAllister's is like, charming as you make it sound, I don't think you quite captured the spirit of Newport. And then Miss Fane is just like, hardly. You need about 5 different outfits, decent jewels, and a full dance card. Newport's all about the rich. And then Miss Bingham starts flirting with Mr. Rakes about, like, she's like, hey, have you've never been to Newport? Oh, well, let me know if you ever have plans to go up there. Let me know if you ever want to go up there. And he's just like, oh, I should make plans at once. And Miss Fane is I feel like she's the most brooding one of them all. Because after she says that, after she's like, oh, you must let me know when you're planning to visit Mr. Rakes. He's like, oh, I will, thank you. I should make plans at once. Her face, like, look at it. She's like, what? And I feel as though she was rooting for Marion and Mr. Rakes. I feel like she wanted them to be together, and she's seeing their division, which I still think might be caused by Miss Russell. So anyway, it cuts back to the Van Rhines, and Marion is sitting there. She's like looking outside. You know, she can like hear whatever. It I swear to God, I thought she was going to leave. I thought she was going to go out and see the thing, but she doesn't apparently. And, so then it cuts to the lighting, back to the lighting ceremony, and we're getting to see Peggy with Mr. Well, first Peggy is sort of like canvassing some people, or not canvassing, whatever it's called. She's going around asking some people like, "Hey, what do you think about all this?" And and then Mr. Fortune, he comes up. He got them some pastries or whatever, cinnamon bun or some shit, and he's like, "Hey, let's get closer." And he like starts moving closer, and he like puts his hand like on the small of her back and like moves them up closer, and she like kind of looks up at him and smiles, like kind of like she obviously has a thing for him. Come on now. And he obviously finds her attractive. We saw that the moment he saw her, and he like stopped what he was doing and was like, "Oh, ooh." So she's basically saying that some folks wondered how long it might be until black people could get electricity in their homes, but most people just wanted to come to see the lights. So we see a band playing, everybody talking, and we get to see Mr. Edison, Thomas Edison, and am I the only one who thinks he looks like that? The guy playing him looks like Elon Musk. Like, I swear to God, he looks a lot like Elon Musk, which is hilarious. Having someone who's playing Thomas Edison that looks like Elon Musk. Maybe it's just me. I don't know, but I think he looks like Elon Musk, which is funny. Anyway, they turn off all the gas lights, and they have this big countdown, and I couldn't help but think of like big 10, 9, 8, and I couldn't just help but think of like New York and like the dropping of the ball and all the New Year's Eve stuff. So they turn on the lights, and we get to see the building. Everybody is just in awe, as the building just slowly like illuminates. Cool to see, because well, at least for me, like I said, I love like just innovation and just like humanity moving forward as a society and scientifically and stuff like that. I just love that shit. Which is another reason why I love Dr. Stone, the anime I mentioned earlier, which they actually do have the sub version on HBO Max. If anyone's interested, it's a great anime about like science and stuff like that. Yeah, he looks a lot like Elon Musk. So anyway, that's the end of the episode pretty much. I don't think anything else really happens. Yeah, they have the lighting. I almost said tree lighting again. Like it's every time I think about saying lighting, tree just pops up in front of it. So yeah, it ends with that. And the lighting, well, actually it ends with Mr. McAllister. He's talking to Miss Russell, and he's like, "This is a turning point in our history, Mrs. Russell. But are we headed in the right direction?" And then Mrs. Russell just says, "We don't have a choice in that matter, Mr. McAllister. We must go where history takes us." And that's the end of the episode. That's how it ends. And I gotta say, this was a great episode. I loved it. We finally got to see Mrs. Turner sacked, and not in the way she wanted, which was great. I'm sure I'm wondering if we're gonna see more of her though. She might pop up again. You never know. I mean, we've definitely seen the best of her. Yeah, a lot happened. We got to see now. Church has been outed apparently, by unless because Bannister doesn't actually say that Miss Turner said it was Church. So I'm wondering if she might have said it was somebody else. Like I don't know, or if she outed Church. But how would she know? So I don't know. We got to see a little more of Oscar, but again, I'm really disappointed that they didn't show his reaction to the accusation. Like I would have really liked to have seen that. I feel as though I've covered basically everything. Yeah. All right. I think that's basically it. I can't wait to see again, as I always say at the end of every one of these, I can't wait to see where it's gonna go and what next episode's gonna entail. So okay, thank you everyone. If you like this video, please like, share, subscribe. If you want to see more of this content. If you didn't like this video, first off, thanks for watching this far, and again, tell me what you didn't like about it and what you think I can do better. So, with all that said, thank you everyone. I've been Apocalypse the Geek Guru. Thank you all for watching.